The photos I'm going to show are very graphic and disturbing in nature. I've chose to use them because I think people need to see them. But if, we are talking about a 14-year-old boy, and some of the images might be distressing, so maybe this one isn't for you. This story is the story of a 14-year-old little boy from Chicago called Emmett Till. The woman involved, Carolyn Bryant, was described as, quote unquote, one of the prettiest black-haired women I ever saw in my life. That was written in the newspaper at the time. Her face, once notorious for one of the worst crimes in history, which helped fuel the civil rights movement. This story begins and ends with the actions and lies of this woman. In 1955, Carolyn was 21, and her path crossed with a little boy. He walked into the Bryan grocery store in rural Mississippi. She claimed that Emmett offended her. She claimed the boy touched and squeezed her hand when he exchanged money for some sweets. She said he asked for a date and was then pulled away by another boy, who was his cousin. Carolyn left the store as the kids all left, and she walked through them all. She went to a car and grabbed a gun. She said Emmett whistled at her. This whistle was also backed up by one of Emmett's cousins. A few days later, Carolyn's husband and brother-in-law, along with other men, black and white, kidnapped Emmett at gunpoint. They tortured that baby to death and then dumped his poor broken body in the Tallahatchie River. But Emmett was not trash. He was an innocent little boy whose only crime was having black skin. This is his story. In 2004, an American historian, Timothy B. Tyson, wrote a book about a similar case that happened in 1970, that of Henry Morrow. This case didn't gain international attention. An all-white jury acquitted both men involved. Carolyn Bryant had read this book and had decided to contact the author to talk about Emmett Till. Like the Morrow case, many people believed that he had violated the race-sex taboo and therefore had it coming. Soon after Emmett's trial, the court transcripts conveniently went missing. It was found briefly in the 60s, until the FBI found a faded copy in 2004. Two clerks transcribed it and one page was missing. It was released in 2007 to the public. It revealed what Carolyn had said on the stand. She claimed Emmett said, quote, "You needn't be afraid of me. I've been with white women before," end quote. She said she had to escape Emmett's forceful grasp. A newspaper at the time said it should have not been called the Wolf Whistle case. It should have been called the attempted rape case, which is absolute bullshit. In the courtroom, there was more than 200 white men and between 50 and 60 African Americans who crowded in the last two rows at the back, plus a segregated table for the black press. At the end of the trial, John W. Witten, defense counsel, said, quote, "I'm sure that every last Anglo-Saxon one of you has the courage to free these men despite this outside pressure," end quote. Mamie Bradley Till, Emmett's mother, was responsible for most of that pressure. She insisted on the open casket for the funeral, so everyone could see what they did to her baby boy. She would travel anywhere and everywhere to speak to whomever she had to. She helped fuel the outrage and condemnation of what those men had done to her 14-year-old child. Mamie wrote a memoir called Death of Innocence, which allows us to see Emmett as the child he was and the young man he was becoming, rather than just the victim of this hideous crime against nature. According to Timothy, Carolyn admitted that she had lied on the stand. When asked what really happened, she said she didn't even remember. In the earliest recorded version of the story, she said Emmett insulted her. There was no grabbing or trying to rape her. This conversation between Carolyn and Timothy was not recorded, but he did put it in his book. She claimed, quote, nothing that boy did could ever justify what happened to them, end quote. So that fatal night, around 2 a.m, Sunday, August 28, 1955, Reverend Moses Wright, which was Emmett Till's uncle. Emmett was visiting from Chicago for some holidays. Moses was woken by a noise on the porch. He was an ordained minister in the Church of God of Christ. Most people called him preacher. A man yelled, "This is Mr. Bryant. We want to talk to the boy from Chicago, the one doing that talking up in money." Preacher's 3 sons, Simeon, Robert and Maurice, plus his wife Elizabeth, were still asleep, as well as 3 boys from Chicago visiting for the summer. His 2 grandsons, Curtis Jones and Wheeler Parker Jr., along with his nephew, Emmett Till, who they all called Bobo. Preacher had heard something had gone down in money, but he thought nothing of it, otherwise he would have sent him back home immediately. A man stood on his porch, 6'2", 250 pounds, a .45 automatic in his hand. This was Millam. Roy Bryant stood at 6 feet and 190 pounds, also with a .45 automatic. Both men had been drinking. Elizabeth offered them money, but they just wanted Emmett. They kidnapped him at gunpoint and took him away in a car. There was many men with them. About 9 a.m. that morning, Curtis Jones ran to a neighbour's to call his mum to let Mamie know what had happened. After getting the news, Mamie began calling the Chicago newspapers and got in touch with Rayfield Moody, a Labour Union official who contacted the African American media in Chicago. Preacher contacted the sheriff, who knew Roy and assumed Emmett was dead. He went and arrested Roy and his half-brother J.W. Millam and interviewed them. On Wednesday, 31st of August, 3 days later, Emmett's body was found in the Tallahatchie River. Roy's twin, Ray, said that Melvin Campbell had done it. Emmett's body had been weighed down with 150 pounds of iron. There was barbed wire wrapped around him, and he had a bullet wound to the right side of his head. On his hand was a silver ring engraved LT, which belonged to his dad. A closed casket seemed certain at this time. Back in Chicago, Emmett loved baseball and was on a team called the Junior Rockets. He was a good pitcher according to teammates. He supported the Brooklyn Dodgers. Brooklyn had broken the colour barrier by signing Jackie Robinson in 1947. and Emmett's favourite player, Dan Newcombe, was signed in 1949. Emmett had also rescued a dog called Mike. Emmett was a lovable, playful, well-behaved child who was very close to his mum and family. His dad had died in the war when he was just a baby. Carolyn said in Timothy's book that racism is taught. She was born July 23rd, 1934. Her father was a plantation manager and a cotton farmer. He also worked in a prison where all the prisoners were black men. She met and married Roy Bryant, and he had 2 sons. So on that little trip to Money to get some snacks, 7 people made up the journey. They drove 3 miles to the Bryant store. The kids were Simeon, who was 12, Emma, who was 14, Rose Crawford, 15, Wheeler, 16, Maurice, 16, Ruth May Crawford, 18, and Felton Pete Parker, 19. One cousin of Emmett said he did have a photo of a white woman inside his wallet, but Mamie said it's a picture that came inside the wallet. He used to brag that it was his girlfriend. Crime of the century. It was a photo of Hedy Lamarr. Wheeler said Emmett was only alone in the store for less than a minute. Apparently, Carolyn was offended that he said goodbye and failed to say yes, ma'am. When Emmett was kidnapped, Roy and Millam only said about a verbal offence. If Carolyn was so scared, why did she walk through 7 black kids to work hard to get a gun? Why not lock the door of the shop and phone her husband or something? Apparently Emmett whistled. And he begged the others to not tell Preacher. Ruthie May said this was his only mistake, and that was he placed the money directly into Carolyn's hand instead of on the counter. In 2005, Simeon backed this up. Maurice said when Emmett left the store, he said goodbye to Carolyn, prompting her to go and get a pistol. Emmett whistled, which scared the others. Simeon told Elizabeth Rice and Preacher found out, but they just didn't think it'd turn into what it did. After Emmett was taken, Elizabeth left Mississippi and went to Chicago. She wrote a Preacher telling him to come. At 9 a.m. the morning of the kidnapping, Curtis Jones, after contacting Mamie, he was scared. I think he wanted to go back to Chicago. Preacher had contacted Sheriff George Smith, like I said. A Sheriff H.C. Estrada was contacted. He got involved and he contacted a black undertaker, Chester Miller, and made the odd request to take him to Preacher's church that day to be buried. He wanted to cover it up. Strider had claimed jurisdiction on the body. He seen no reason to do an autopsy. When Mamie found out, she was incensed. She wanted them to be buried in Chicago. She called her Uncle Crosby Smith, who promised to get the body home to her. Rayfield urged Mamie to open the casket when Emmett's body arrived home. It was under strict demands that it was not to be opened, but Mamie dared them to come to Chicago and sue her. She was opening that casket no matter what. She needed to see a baby. Sadly, the whole world needed to see what hatred looked like. A reporter for Jet magazine, Simeon Buka, was instructed to follow to the funeral home to take pictures. The lid was removed and the smell was thick and heavy. No mother should have to see what Mamie seen. She said he didn't appear to be human. Mamie decided to leave the casket open so everyone could see a baby. A glass airtight container helped keep the smell at bay a little, and the church doors remained open for the public and the media. The image of Emmett was published September 15th, 4 days before the trial of Roy and JW. Even though there was many more involved, only these two took the fall. The media broadcasting the trial helped turn another Southern horror story into a call for action. There was an urgent need for American black and white to unite to stop this insanity. Emmett was casualty of the Supreme Court's decision in Brown v. Board of Education, which was handed down May 17, 1954, dubbed Black Monday. It was thought at the time that it would put black boys in harm's way. Judge Thomas Brady thought it would encourage white violence against black people, but nothing new in the age of Jim Crow. Many wanted black people to remain second-class citizens, using any force necessary. JW justified the murder using terms of violent racial and sexual politics. The trial was a joke, a performance. Roy and JW had 5 lawyers. The jury were 12 white men. Sidney Carlton was witness tampering. He tried to get Preacher to not testify, who by now was sleeping in his car out of fear. It began September 19th, 20 days after Emmett was found. There was no murder weapon or crime scene. Witnesses testified that Emmett had been murdered in the headquarters shed of the Clint Sheridan plantation, which was managed by JW's brother. Sheridan visited but found no blood, but they had said that it had been recently cleaned. A young boy, Willie Reed, claimed to have seen 4 white men and 3 black men and a truck with a black boy in it. He heard whipping and crying from that shed. This was confirmed by a Mandy, Bradley and Reed's granddad. The other witnesses were not called. Rather than refute the evidence, the defence explained why Emmett was murdered, claiming a black boy tried to rape a young white mother and wife. Carolyn lied on that stand. The jury retired at 2:34 p.m. When they returned, they said they found the defendants not guilty. They later said that they had to wait so long to make it look good. They never even cared about the evidence. Reed left and went to Chicago for his own safety. Mamie continued to be an activist for the civil rights movement, giving talks all around the world. Black boys had been being lynched for as long as many could remember. What made Emmett's lynching worse? Nobody knows. Maybe it was because of the use of new media, TV. A black boy killed by white men was nothing shocking, but Mamie making her Mamie making her private pain and grief public was a major force in portraying the reality of hatred and racism. It was only in March 2022 that Joe Biden signed the anti-lynching bill a century after it was proposed, which finally made it a federal crime. I'm sorry, I got a bit emotional at some points there. It just breaks my heart to see the pictures of Emmett when he was alive, when he was just this 14-year-old boy, compared to what they done to him. It came out years later. Roy and his brother were interviewed. They were paid an interview, and in it they basically admitted that yeah, they did it, they were guilty, and they didn't care. In the early 2000s, Mamie gave an interview, and she was saying that she holds no hatred towards them, the ones that hurt her baby. She said with the Bryants, I believe she said, that they've had a lot of devastation themselves. They've lost a child, and that they've suffered thanks to karma. Brave lady. I know this was a hard one to listen to, but there's a few links in the description box if anyone wants to check them out. And I'll see you in my next one. Have a good day. Bye.